Let's talk about this consumer behavior. This consumer behavior is again a very exciting area, and it's a very core area for any marketer to actually understand the behavior of consumer that is going to affect the buying decision as well as the repeated purchase from that consumer, because this is ultimately the end user of your product, and having um, retaining that consumer, making that consumer happy and satisfied is a dream job for every marketing organization. And as we said, that it can be the consumer buyer behavior, it can be business buyer behavior. So consumer are more like individuals, and the business behavior, business buyers are basically more other organizations. So they would have different behaviors, and there are different factors that would be influencing their behavior. So we'll discuss some of them. For example, the factors that would affect consumer, they are known as the cultural factor, the social factor, personal factor, and psychological factor. So we have to look this consumer in this broader sense, that they are part of a or some culture, so that culture would have a strong influence on this consumer. For example, if you want to buy, if you want to sell a product which is not halal in a Muslim country, it's not going to be sold. So you need to understand that the consumer behavior, the consumer values, they are based on the cultures. So one culture, may be suitable for one product and may not be suitable for the other. Similarly, the social culture, the kind of, the dress, the kind of food is consumed, the eating habit of people, that would make a very strong influence on the consumer. Personal factors are all different. We do live in a society, we do follow similar culture, but we may be personally different. We might have different perception about ourselves. So on that basis, consumer can be again classified into what is their self perception about them, and what kind of products they would like to fulfill that aspirations that they have about their own self. Similarly, psychological things are also important, like consumer psychology. It does play a very important role. How people make buying decisions. Are they abrupt decisions? Are they impulse buyers? Or are they very much meticulous? So we have to look at all these factors that would decide the behavior of consumers. So they really help a lot in understanding the behavior of consumers. On the other hand, you also need to know that there are three components of buyer decision process. The one is who is buying decision maker. You need to look at, for example, in a family, if somebody wants to buy food product or they are doing groceries, so who are the person who is making that decision? So you need to look at that. Then you need to look at the types of buyer decisions, that what kind of buyers decision have to make, and then what other things those customer have to buy as well. So you need to look at that, what is the dynamics of that buyer decisions, and what are different types of decisions have to be made by that buyer. And then you need to look at the steps in the buyer decision process. What are the steps involved to make that decision to buy a specific product or not. So once you know that, then you can tailor your product, services, promotion accordingly, so that you reach to that consumer that know very well, that how they make up their decision, what they want, and then how you can fulfill fulfill that need from that consumer. So the buying decision maker, it has got a strong role, of course, in buying decision process. Maybe somebody goes to the market and just buys thing, but the decision is being made by another person, maybe within the family as well. So that would make up that you have to satisfy that person who is making that decision. So that becomes a little more important, because ultimately it's who this guy was going to make the decision whether to buy a product or not. Maybe the person who's directly buying thing, they may be a purchaser, maybe they don't use, for example, and their partners may be telling them what to buy. Maybe servants are going to buy something, but they are being told by their, higher ups that what needs to be bought. So they just make that quick decision. So you need to identify who is the right decision maker, and you have to influence that decision maker. Then the kind of decisions that are the type of buyer decisions, they can be classified in two different axes. On one, you can see the commitment level of the buying process, and the second is the difference between the brands, like how committed is the person to buy that thing, and then there are different brands and how you are going to commit to one brand or the another, or how you're going to pick one brand or the other. It might be based upon several factors, like whether it's a price or whether it's the size or something else. So this model would be there are 5 steps in buyer decision process. The buyer have to recognize a need. First of all, they must need that, feel this need that they need something. They would second step is they would seek information like how this need can be fulfilled. Then they would evaluate, because there would be more than one way that the needs can be fulfilled. So they would evaluate all their alternatives, that how one brand or the other, depending upon the price or the quantity or the benefits that they offer, they would have to make that evaluation. And after evaluation, people make decisions whether to purchase one thing or the other. And then after they have made that decision, they also make post-purchase assessment as well, whether they feel satisfied with the product they have purchased or not. If they are not satisfied, maybe they are not coming back to you again. So this is the model that tells us about these 5 steps that are involved in making decision by these consumers. And this decision making process is start much before purchase. So you have to be able to convey your information and the promotional material to those people before they can make that decision. Because once they have made that decision, then probably a very strong promotion can only change that. So you need to consider that as well. Then there are other kind of market, like a bigger market, for example, business buyer behavior. Now, this is going to be different than the consumer buyer behavior, because you are dealing with organizations and they would have multiple specialized people, they would be doing that kind of assessment, and they would have different parameters that would be decisive for whether to select a particular product or brand, a particular vendor or not. So they would have a process, a regulated process in which they make decisions. So this would be very much different from consumer perspective, and it would include many factors such as environmental factor, organizational factor, interpersonal factors, and individual factors. So again, here we are not only dealing with this individual, but it has got interpersonal relation within that organization, and then this organization itself would have some rules, perceptions, and then that would be also affected by the overall environment. So these all factors are basically influencer on making this buying decision by these organizations. Again, we need to look at who is the decision maker, what are the types of decision that this decision maker has to make, what are the other products that this decision maker is going to buy as well. So you need to understand broadly these people, and then you have to look at the steps in buyer decision process, and these steps can be very different from the consumer, because this may be very much structured program by which these organizations would buy certain things. So maybe this decision is made by the buying center. It might have different members coming from different departments within that. They might have users. Maybe the buying center is a different one, the user are different. Then there are influencers within that organization who are going to make that influence that decision making process as well. So buyer would select the supplier for routine sampling. There would be deciders within that organization. They would have the final authority whether to select those suppliers or not. And there might be gatekeepers as well who control the information flow into the buying center as well. So as I said, this may be a little more complex, but if we can we can summarize this in 8-step process. The organization, how they make their decisions, they would recognize a problem first, that they need something. Then they describe the general needs, that what is needed to solve those problems. They would specify different kinds of products that they might want to buy. They would seek suppliers who can provide those services or products. They would solicit those proposals. They would ask those vendors to give their proposals, prices, etc. And on that basis, you would have a comparison select those suppliers, then order the desired specification, and afterwards they would review the performance of those suppliers, and they keep on making decision whether, and they might rate their suppliers like who are the better one, who are the most preferred one. So this is a little more complex decision making process, but again, knowing this decision process as well as the decision process by the consumer, they are very much important for any marketer, because this is more like their eyes and ears by which they can see and hear what people have to say about your product. How are they going to make purchasing decision? If you can influence that purchase decision, then of course you can have a broad base of your customers and you can have loyal customers.